Dhamma jimden den de shen she ban tra chon ba yang da. Zobe san je re pa dan sha sun de. Devar she ban ji den chen ba ji won de. Kalo je ba la na me ba la da me nan je de. San je jimden den be ja wa sha ja du ba. Cha che lo she do ja zo che won de ma jimden. Di shen she ban tra chon ba yang da ban zobe san je re pa. Sha sun de ban devar she ban ji den chen ba ji won de. Kalo je la na me ba la da me nan je de. Sanje jimden de be jawa sha ja do ba la sha zhen. Che de jiao zuo xie wu de ma jimden de de shen xie wan zha zhu. Yang da ba zuo be sanje ri ba da sha zuo. De wu de xie wan ji den jian ba ji wu de be ka lo ju. La na me ba la da me nan je de ma sanje jimden. Be jawa sha ja do ba la sha zhen lo xue de jiao zuo xie. Kan se gan ye zuo wo jia dong ze sa xian de na gong ba de. Manen ji den de na chu zhe. Teze kia wa cha ma cha zang nam da ku ma shu du su. Yi shi jia zu se ji feng bo da cha wang ji de su na nam. Gong bo shu ni jia la cha zang lo sen juan den ba ti men da wei shi. Sen duan cha wa jia la cha zang lo de zhui che da se ba su ma. Nian mei jian jian jia la cha zang lo gong bo tu ji shi de. Tam ji qian bei duan ba bo su na me yun den jia zu. Yi xin xia la cha zang lo ta bian de sha che. 因为俺说来最近阶段的那么教育，新旧叫拉萨这个全年这个老爷，哪怕他拉萨的呢，新个他妈也的，俺对老爷查这个的我亲也没这些，给我本身说吧这让给什么样子，天天上街点把你干嘛让人嘛没，就嘛是我去不了当，没那么老大真的，历史上那么在这当，说那么地也当这些个。 Koban damne jen jen ra de gada nada chiwe lam chu. Sibe so nan jo wan jo bare sho.
The teacher, the blessed one, the one God, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the teacher having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one gone to thusness I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, sublime pure reality. To that Dharma which pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime community intending virtue I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of suffering, of aging, sickness, and death.
Sanje Jano Soje Jano Chanju Bado Dane Jansu Nage Jeso Jebeso Dola Beje Sanje Drubo Shuva Sanje Jano Soje Jano Chanju Bado Dane Jansu Nage Jeso Jebeso Dola Beje Sanje Drubo Shuva Sanje Jano Soje Jano Chanju Bado Dane Jansu Nage Jeso Jebeso Dola Beje Sanje Drubo Shuva Sanje Jano Soje Jano Chanju Bado Dane Jansu Nage Jeso Jebeso Dola Beje Sanje Drubo Shuva
I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other professions, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other professions, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Tamji Jambala Sa Zelo Deda Sanji Jumden de Shesha Bada Juma Yado Sanjari Shazun Dema Devar Shiva Jiden Jamba Juva Deba Hano Juva Nana Beba Nana Bena Jedaba Sanji Jumden de Esu. The Shesha Wadi the Sonanda Vijudama Gevesa Wanama Juva Sibera to Jim. Sonam Jederanam Jishi, Pesha Sambanam Jibu, Chana Jimato Jibu, Juya Jamba to Motona Vijuma. Tebe Mevana Lomba Sheriff Siju with the Motona Monziva, Simja Tamji Tamba. Chanju Sembanam Jabu, Pabe Kazana, Jabo, Yangan de Botrajan, Tebe. Ishepado Meva, Baba Saji Majib, Sonabata, Yani, Kujeta, Chomiju, Kutsumba Meva, Devata, Sudaganyava Mago, Sumevata, Dungan, and the Batu, Pubota, and the Batu. Come on, the Medemba, Jajanamata, Devana, Mashid, Yoto, Dawata, and the Batu, Sivan, Chuma. Surely, I gave a Yishi Yoto, Devata, Majumba, Sanjay Jumden, Yishin, and Neva. Yangana Devala Meneva Yanava Yatana, the Simja Tapian, the Sibas, the Dania Sanjay Jumden, Juguchi, when you then Yana, Namasu, Tabation, Tomagi, Tomagi. Tenasama Sindrasama Madeba Yozo Taba Yozo Chawa Yahata, Deme, Pishiba, Yavata, De Tomana Daniel, Kevana, Sozoranga Rimba, Jimden, Javasu, Children, Yaraja Zovesha, the Rovacha, Meduma, the Vata, Taba Yuva, Tebashibu, Lebrashu, Chambrashu, Tebashibu, Tebashibu, Charge of Vezu, Sonan Pages. 新源是中央区的这边的做就个广东话这边的做就个全部看这个你做我这他们这上街的那个嘛就那这等等的就是这开发就那厂子看个土生年说的大瓦藤这方面就特别深的都过他们的那厂子咯 So last time I stopped here, maybe. So here, I think so one might ask, is this, yeah, I think this, if that sutra is not showing simultaneity of the seed and sprout by way of ascending and descending side of a scale, then what kind of simultaneity is being illustrated by the analogies, by that analogies? The commentary states that analogies employed to thoroughly illustrate that illusion like mutually dependent originations, which one come about simultaneously and are established within an unanalyzed perspective. So I think this is, so far now we have refuting the things that exist or arises by itself, and things also do not arise from the others. But still, the concept of arising is accepted. The arising is possible, but nothing arises by itself. So normally, usually what we think is the tendency to think if things do not arise by themselves, which means it has to arise from others, right? So in the Prasangika school says, when things do not arise by itself or by themselves, like a sprout, the arising of the sprout is not done by the sprout itself, right? Arising of the sprout is not done by the sprout itself. An arisen sprout also not arises, right, by itself. So two things. Arising of the sprout is done by the sprout itself. Then the problem is if the arising had caused or done by the sprout itself, which means sprout is already exist. Without existing of the sprout, it cannot cause it arising. It cannot, perform the activities of the arising, right? So, so therefore, the arising, if you put this in the future state, then there is no sprout that performing arising. If you think that the arising is performed by the sprout that is already arisen, again, it's a problem, because once the sprout is already arisen, physically manifest, and there is no need for it arises, because it's already arisen. So therefore, the arising is in a conceptually constructed entity. It's not a physical thing. It's not objectively exists. It is not done by the sprout itself. So rather, it's constructed and fabricated by the concept. So therefore, there is no intrinsic nature of the arising. So no intrinsic arising, and arising is not by itself is the same, is the same meaning, right? And then once we refute arising by itself, an intrinsic arising, and then if you think, therefore the arising must be come from or performed by or the caused by its own cause. Like arising of the sprout must be performed by the seed, because there is no sprout to perform arising, right? So, so then, if the seed, during the seed, if there is any performance of activity of arising, then again, arising is from the seed. So arising arising of the sprout is considered to be the effect or the result of the seed. So this cause and effect become simultaneous. If seed is doing that, right? So during the seed, there is arising. So if during the seed, there is the arising of the sprout, and then the problem is, and when the sprout is non-existing, how can there be a rising of the sprout? During the seed,
sprout is non-existing. So how can there be non-existings arising? Right. So I think from there, saying that, so then if you, again, if you go another step, like, I mean the sprout that already arisen arises from the seed that is different from the sprout. So there things do arises from others. So now the question is, how do you really consider that the sprout and the seed being others? So if the seed and the sprout is other, or barley seed is, different from this barley sprout is physically different from the barley seed. And so then cause and effect become two different phenomena, right? So so in that case, every cause and effect has to be, has to be other, or the physically different. So, and the yogurt and milk become different, two different things. Seed and sprout is different, yogurt and milk is different. So if the yogurt is different from the milk, so milk becoming yogurt is not possible. To become, how can how can the orange become the apples? How can apple becoming into orange? Because so if the apple is not going to be not going to become the orange is not going to become the apple, because what is the reason for this? Because they are different. They are different, physically different. And then the horse is not becoming cow is not becoming horse, and tomato is not becoming chili is not becoming tomato. And then, so if the seed remain different from, physically different from the sprout, and that becoming, so how that really can be, the possible. So so then every day is become different. Every day is, today is different from yesterday. Yesterday is different from today, right? So now the different means now. So what you mean by difference? So are you, yesterday and today, is there is a difference in the time, different in different period. So there's a difference in the different period or the time. So that does not really make them, right? Today is coming from other day, another day, right? So milk is not coming from other, as milk is, yogurt is not coming from the others. So if the yogurt is not coming from or become from the other cause, so by so why would we say this yogurt is from milk, but it's not from others, right? So mother pointing to her child says, "This is this is from me, or I gave birth to this, but this not born from others." And the farmers who plant the seed in the plants comes out and then pointing at the plants, this I planted, right? So I planted trees. So they don't say, I plant that seed and this happened. This tree is come from others. So there is no otherness. In a mundane perspective, there is no otherness. But so the difference in the time, you can also say is yesterday myself and today's myself. So yesterday I had good experience, right? Not today. Or today I'm having good time. Tomorrow will not, right? So there is the kind of the difference in the condition, right? Difference in the different days. So that's still not considering these. Today myself is different from yesterday myself. So the born from others is here trying to refuting. So if otherness of there is the intrinsic, so intrinsically different. If there's intrinsic otherness, then it has to be like an apple and orange. So yeah, so not by itself, not from others. So not from both, not without a cause. So then, as a so it kind of the so so then after the refuting this four chronologic, four hypothetical chronologic, and by refuting it, what led. So what it's establishing is yes, the arising is conventionally, it is ordinarily accepted. So in this way, so the Prasangika school is saying that so you can also apply to the, like, for example, this life and next life. So next life is no different from this life person, right? So this life person is not going to be other person, right? So and then the person in the next life is the once it's already born, it's not going to arise. It's not going to arises from previous previous person. And before it existing, before the existing of the next life person, there is no arising of him or her, right? So today, this life. So and then still now says we consider the disintegrating of this life and arising of the next life, coming of the next life. This life is disintegrating, going towards the end. Next lives start coming. So the coming and this life going and next life coming. So that we say it is like two sides of the scale, ascending and descending simultaneously. So now, if this life is going towards the end, next life is coming to manifest, is if these two activities are, considered to be two sides of the scale simultaneously, so that simultaneity of these two activity is again not physical. It never happened physically. So simultaneity of these two is not happening in physically. There is no, so yeah. So that means it's not objectively, it's not intrinsically. There's a two activities simultaneously going on. Intrinsically, not physically, right? So and then how do you really know? How do you really think that these two activities is simultaneous? So this is the kind of two activities as a twin activities of the simultaneously happening in conceptual. It's conceptual. One is going, one is coming. So the conceptual, so object that merely exists through the conceptualizations, through the concept, so is never be intrinsic, never inherent existing, never objectively exists. And also this activity is not objectively groundable, it's a conceptually. So the Prasangika school says, when we refute the intrinsic nature of the two activities, to act, we are not refuting, right? When we say the coming of next life and going to end of this life is simultaneously, that does not mean next life person and this life person has simultaneously exist. Like disintegrating of the seed or arising of the sprout is simultaneous, like a two sides of the scale. That does not mean the seed and the sprout has simultaneously exist. They are not, happen to exist at the same time. So that proves this accepted two activity is functioning together is in the face of the concept. So that saying is not intrinsic. So that is the reality that is constructed. So reality that is constructed by the concept. So mental construct, this mental construct. So the Prasangika school, when they refute the intrinsic nature of this two activity, is not refuting or annihilating the, how's that? Yeah, it's not proving that seed and the sprout or the cause and effect simultaneously existing. So if you accept as intrinsic nature, then you have to accept. You have no other choice. Cause and effect has to be simultaneous. So this is, what we're refuting is not reason is not bouncing back to you. It's not, it's not shooting back to you. So commentaries state that this analogy, so unanalyzed perspectives. That means if you analyze the two activities simultaneously, if you analyze that, and then it goes against the reality, because if you analyze activity of, the disintegration of the seed and a rising of the sprout is happening, right? It's happening intrinsically, simultaneously. So that means seed and sprout has to be there to perform the functions, right? There's a seed simultaneous with the sprout and performing its disintegrating, and the sprout is there to perform coming. If the sprouts already exist, there's no need for coming. It's already came. So that's why I'm saying the simultaneity of the two activities arising and the disintegrating is kind of accepted to be existing, or it is reality, from the unanalyzed perspective. The phrase dependent originations, which comes about simultaneously, needs to be related to the simultaneous presence of the two processes. Furthermore, in that sutra, the analogy of the ascending and descending side of a scale is supposed to illustrate two things that are simultaneous. But this cannot be related to the simultaneity of seed and a sprout. So as I mentioned earlier, this is not going to prove that seed and sprout has simultaneously exist. Therefore, the rejections of the simultaneity of the two acts here is that here is that of two act in general not being rejected. By refuting the intrinsic nature, is we are not annihilating the existing of that. For as long as one accepts arising, the cessation of the cause and the approach of the effect to the point of arising would have to be taken to be a simultaneous. So it's conventional. It's just, say, when the Sunday is going towards the end, right? When the Sunday is going towards the end, that very moment, Monday is coming. So it's a conventional, right? When the Sunday is going, that the very reason is the sign of Monday is coming. So there seems seemingly simultaneity of Sunday going, Monday coming, right? So that reality is created by the concept. So that is not ultimate or is not really objectively exist. So I think here that we're trying to kind of single out what we are negating. We are not negating simultaneity of the two actions. We are not, we are not approving and a cause and effect simultaneously. So intrinsic, we are negating intrinsic nature. So and also that when this live person is going towards the end, is a process of dying or disintegrating. So the very end of this life, that moment is the beginning of the next life. And there's from this life, nothing physically, nothing intrinsically going, but the very existing of the next life is the imprint or print of this life. So, in the Prasangika schools, they don't really accept any physical level, any intrinsic qualities transferring to the next life. So and then the Siddhartha school and then non-Buddhist school, there's particularly some Charvaka schools who don't believe in next life and previous life says from the ashes nothing goes to the next life. So therefore there is no next life, right? So which means if something from this life to the next life, if something is going, and then must be coming up from ashes or a dead body, something rise and then go, right? So the Prasangika school is this is not the case. Continuity does not mean one physically something has to transfer, right? So today is the continuity. Yesterday, there is no any physical that came to the today. So if you and also the essence of the dependent originations, Nagarjuna use the 8 example, right? One is like the watery mouth from looking at the lemon. So watery mouth is there's nothing from the lemon coming to your mouth, but this this mouth in the how's that? So water in the mouth mimics that. So there's a something out there. So this still is the continuity of that lemon that you see. And then the mold from the print, so it's also continuity, but nothing physically transferring.
I'm trying to illustrate. I mean, of course, this is very intangible. And I mean, consciousness itself, that word is a fabrication. And maybe, I'm just kind of playing here, since all our words and labels are fabrications, maybe we can't really ultimately separate the physical world from what we call the conscious world, because I mean, we're always trying to do that, even in Buddhism. I mean, it's like the elements dissolve, and we're talking about this imprinting thing. The elements dissolve, and consciousness dissolves as well. And I don't have any problem with something kind of arising moment to moment. And I always have some difficulty with, of course, it's the fabrication probably I'm having difficulty with. This thing about, this thing we label consciousness, continuing, even as we say the physical world appears to continue after what we call the point of death. Somehow I would feel maybe I'm a bit nihilistic here. It would be much simpler for me to say, all these imprints are just kind of an illusion. They don't really exist either. And even continuity itself is only an appearance. That's what I'd like to say. Continuity itself is only an appearance. We can't demonstrate that it really exists. And therefore, this idea of imprinting and continuity and the continuity of consciousness and the physical world is kind of a very comfortable fabrication. But it wouldn't be surprised if the dream stopped.
Yeah.
Something like that. You know, why should we appear, why should we be comfortable that the dream continues either in the form of physical matter or consciousness or awareness or any of that? So that's where my difficulty is.
Yeah. I think difficulties continuously remain. So I think that's why we are Nagarjuna's, using kind of so many different ways to explain one single point. So I think, if because you find it's kind of, what do you call it? There is no tangible reality to accept, to be comfortable. So again, when you ask yourself, so I always, every day we witness our life, right? So we see I'm living, and we see our world. We see, that's what we call my life. So life that you're seeing, being witnessed all the time. So if you analyze that, so where do you see your life? When you look into your body, there's just air, outside air that comes in and out. And as a result of the continuous doing that, it produces the heat in the body, the blood that flows, and then, and the space also kind of, cooperate to be able to breathe in and out. And then uh, because of the blood that flows kind of, what do you call it? Sprayed in your body, and you feel there's some kind of solidity, right? Now, in the which part, all of them is just element, is outcome element. There is no person, there is no male, there's no female, but when in contact to the consciousness, subtle consciousness, it gives you the experiencing of the life. So you cannot say that my life is existing outside of this outcome element. And rather you also, there's nothing you can prove that my life is in the air, in the blood, in the space, in the earth element. But you experience, so you witness, you talk about your life. So every day I say no one can erase that existing of your life. But if you want to prove and is my life exists outside of this element, or is my life is existing inside of the elements? Like a color, it's like a color that is it really exists out there, independent from the eye sense power. It's the color that exists, within the form by itself. So if the color could not find, not in the form, not in the space, not in the light, not inside or within the on the eye sense power, but together there's a color to see. So a similar way, we see our life, happy life, not happy life, disappointing. They all, it's just from experience and construct, experience and construct, mental construct, then experience. It's very obvious to us. But there is no physical that we can prove that life is existing within the element or outside of the element. So this going on and on, like whole life, 80 years old, 90s, just at the end, the elements, they, by nature, they dissolve. So when the element dissolve, the settled consciousness, right? Settled consciousness never being and without the element. So instantly, this life, these elements give up on you. Instantly, you catch and another elements. So when you how's that? Attach to another element, new form, new life. And that life is also not tangible, it's not physical. And that continues the experience. And that elements give up on the consciousness catches another element. So that is called cycling in samsara. So, in the, so here the idea of that is now, idea of the liberation is to end this, changing, the cycling in this element, to caught into this element. So so here the more you understand, the deeper you understand the intrinsic reality, the illusion-like reality, and then the less the fixation on attachment, emotionally kind of grasping on those mental construct. So when you cut consciousness completely stopped the grasping, just merely seeing illusion-like phenomena, and then it stopped the cycling in samsara. So that's why you say Buddha, they said, and the essence of dependent originations by Nagarjuna's, it says, Tuba, Tuba Shagya Tuba, the able ones. So he has enabled his body, speech, and mind. Therefore, he is the able one. Means he has control over his body, speech, and mind. Therefore, he is the able one. So the Buddha stopped grasping on the mental construct. So the enlightened beings, the perfect enlightened beings, who has never engaged, never relied on the mental construct, free from mental construct, that is a perfect enlightened being. And the arhats, the enlightened beings, are, they rely on, they engage on the mental construct, but they do not fixate, they do not grasp on the mental construct. So I think that's a kind of, before the Buddha Shakyamuni and the Samkhya school happened, and 5,000 maybe years back, Samkhya school, they talk about, the idea of balancing. So this is dul mu ningtops element, and then I think in the Tibetan translation from Sanskrit, in the Tibetan is mumba, means is it's a kind of ignorance, not knowing the realities, not understanding so ignorance and the elements. So if you remain within this ignorance and element, and then this is like, what they say is, so between the ignorance and element, and you are emotional, continuously planting the seed. So like when you put the seed in soil, and the soil, water, suns all kind of, grow that seed into the bigger tree. So this, then it's become uncontrollable. So become like physical. This is, the Samkhya school thinks that, if you continuously remain in this between element and ignorance, if you don't find any balance, right, and then it continuously growing all this, discomfort and unpleasant. So this continues to, and then it become uncontrollable. So now dul mu ningto means, ningto is the like, I don't know, maybe you can say it's the atma, the pride, or the ownership. If you put ownership in the between ignorance and element, there's a try to own, try to control, right? So try to control over elements, try to control over the ignorance, and you're trying to find the balancing within this ignorance and element. So Samkhya school only talk about the balancing, and then by balancing, and you're not falling on one side. They're not talk about totally freedom from the ignorance. So single-pointed meditations is very essential in the Samkhya school. Any kind of, it's not necessarily to be meditating impermanence or the emptiness or the condition of suffering. They're all kind of always trying to find the strength in the mind to be able to focus on one single object. And therefore you can be in the between, and elements not really overpowering on you, ignorance not overpowering on you. You always find a balance. So Samkhya school talk about that. Now in the Buddhists, so Nagarjuna praises to the Buddha Shakyamuni from the beginning, homage to the Buddha. And one who talks about the dependent originations, not arising, not ceasings. One who means that implies many of those masters saying the condition of these negative emotions, negative emotional of the suffering, are caused by element and ignorance. So element is the main, cause to continuously give rise this condition of suffering. So the Buddha says, no, elements are not the causal conditions to producing the suffering. So elements is not the reason that we suffer, right? So, and then some master says, no, it's a timing. If you live in the time, if you know the perfect time, you will be happier. If you do not know the time, you just, you just engage in something that is untiming. So maybe there's the problems. So sometimes, that time is independent. Independent time is causal. So Buddha says not the independent time, not the elements, not the particles is causing suffering. The suffering is because of the mind itself not being able to understand the reality as it is. So the Buddha says, if your mind being able to, abide in the reality as it is, so when your mind is become so, perfectly, how's that? And then sometimes there's a inseparable with reality. When mind become inseparable with the reality, and that element cannot overpower. And there is no ignorance or the darkness to overpower you. So that is the state of freedom or the liberation. So, and in some way, sometimes there is some kind of in non-Buddhist school, there's some, it seems that's making sense to us because the element, our action also training our own element, right? So, for example, if you habit, so kind of your strong habituations of being angry all the time, and sometimes you are not, good in anger, but elements remind you, hey, yeah, you have to be angry, right? So element is the corporate condition because you have trained the element to be unstable. So therefore, element also there are some corporate conditions, some degree of the corporate condition for generating the so negative emotions. So sometimes people go, I think that it's muscle memory, right? It's the muscle memory, or also there's an angry also train our anger also train our the element, our I think the so the because more you're angry, the blood pressure goes up, right? So blood pressure going up and physically, unpleasant discomfort that contributes the mind says now you have reason to be disliked, right? So and then your mind also projects the negative characteristics. So the physical discomfort and contributing the mind become unhappy, mind has the tendency to superimpose on something. With that, so there's some degree of training or kind of habituating, right? Habituating your physical level. So but saying that the elements are not the causal conditions. Elements are not the causal condition.
I'm having a lot of trouble with this because this sounds kind of very a little bit hypocritical of me, actually. I can't find it. I know there's a better word, but I can't find it.
Is you say hypocritical or hypocritical?
Well, it's like we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. There's no self, and yet we're going to train our mind, we're going to train our body, we're going to change our conditioning. We don't know the self is inside or outside. It kind of sounds to me like this thing, fuel and fire. Oh, we have to light the fire. Oh, fuel depends on fire. Training the self depends on, there's no self. Things as they are. These are all a bunch of fabrications. And I have to say, frankly, I don't know if I'm communicating very well right now. This is where the idea of Dzogchen has tremendous appeal to me, because ultimately, from the Dzogchen viewpoint, you're not really, this whole thing about training. It's all like an illusion, a battle of fabrications. It's all altered state. That the only thing to do is kind of watch things, let them settle on their own without the illusion of interfering. At least that's how I understand or misunderstand this. Am I making any sense to you?
Yeah, a lot of. That's too much. It's making sense. All are making sense to you. Because this is this is supposed to be like that. Because we are here, the Nagajanas in the Prasangika school, trying to explain the inexpressible reality with expression. So when inexpressible reality, they express through the expression, and then there's always difficult to convince, but still this is the only way. So all the verbals, the languages, and the concepts are all lie, but without relying on them, there is no way you can, get into the ultimate reality. But you have, so the idea here is saying this whole conventional reality, how delicate they are, how fragile they are, how unstable they are. So just understanding of the conventional realities is very penetrative. It's not really solid and concrete. So, when, through the language, when we explain to them, explain and describe on it, so through, like, for example, it's like illusion, like the dream, like. So now you have to understand what we are talking about. For example, arising of the sprout. Yeah, it's a reality. Yes, it is. There is a rising. Without arising of the sprout, how can sprout be arisen? When there's no coming, how can there something has came? When there's no going, how can there be gone? So now, if you try to kind of, objectively single out what is going, that is happening before the gone, and then you cannot find. There is no such thing as a going that exists by itself, independent from the gone. So then it says, oh, the going is a mental construct. So the main thing is to understand the mental constructs are not intrinsic. Mental constructs are not not the thing that exists by their own essence. It has to be created to be existing, to be a knowable object. You have to create. So now understanding all of them are creation of the thought and the verbal. And that's how you understand. Now you can see in the Dzogchen level, everything is like a dream, nothing truly exists, and everything you have to go beyond the mental concept and the mental construct and to see and settle in the pacification of the mental concept. So I think that's the kind of, it's not really easy to just by sitting and just give me that, right? It's like almost like I'm throwing a ball and it just catches. Oh, I got it now, so let me go. So you have the continuously, as a continuous battle to this our strong habituations of misconceiving. So I think in the before the Buddha, there are a lot of spiritual path and many practice, many idea, but all beliefs kind of they're convinced there is some kind of liberation. There has to be moksha has to be, and then what is the path that can reach that state of liberations? And they say, oh, just so my suffering and my individual suffering, and I experience because of the body, because of the airs that comes in and out, the blood that flows, this all causing the suffering. And these all have some contribution for our anger, attachment, and the arrogance, and all of them. Because the physical, the expression is there, right? When you get angry, there's, position of the physical. Attachment, there's physical positions. So this whole element is acting than what you're thinking, right? So which means your emotional is, planting the seed in the elements. Element is fertilizing that seed that you planted. So then the seed grows, become in strong habituations. So many of those things now, if the elements are the cause, so almost I cannot live without the elements. Therefore, I cannot consider that, without element that I can be alive. So if the elements are the cause of the suffering, so I cannot avoid these elements. Now I have to find in the between. So elements not overpowering on me, ignorance is not overpowering on me. So I use single pointed. I just kind of this is finding the corner to not to be overpowered by the elements and the ignorance both. So the single pointed meditations they started. So all of the followers they still believe, the elements are the origin of the suffering. So the Buddha says, no, the elements are not the origin of the suffering. So with element, and then all these emotionals that arises with element are origin of suffering. So emotional by itself, it cannot be origin of suffering. Element is not the origin of the suffering. So the origin of the suffering is not objective. So when you go out and you feel very hot, so the temperature is so high, so now if you think, right? If you think, so what is the origin of that? It's just by the heat itself. Heat itself is not the cause of the heat that you experience, or hearts, right? Feeling, heat, right? And you contact with heat is the cause for the experience. So your contact means you are not the heat, right? And by yourself, you cannot experience the heat. Just because of the heat, it's not necessary you have to experience the heat. So the emotional play with element is the condition of suffering. So yeah, I think that's here's the most significant point. Significant point is the to understand the mental constant as impositional factors or mental creations. So understanding mental constant and mental creation means they do not exist by their own essence. So then, what are the mental constant? What are the mental constant? Then we say, just almost about like everything is a mental constant. The leaf having color is the mental constant, right? Hat having a size is also mental constant. The braid having color, smell, taste, tactilities, and taste, tactility forms are separate or different. Is all mental constant. And a forest as a singular and having many trees is mental constant. The government that having many departments is mental constant. A country, the nations, all of them the mental constant. So mind is making things, so mind is making things existing. So making things existing means, right, there is no, that does not mean there is no basis at all. You're just, making a knot in space. So I experience something physically, I feel something, then I say, this is, this thing is, how's that? For example, if I taste the honey, so nice, this honey is sweet. And then I kind of, weigh with my hands. Oh, this honey is a little heavier than the others. That honey is really lighter than this. So this whole conceptually construct. So I think to reduce the afflictive emotions, to reduce the delusional mind, is to bring your mind closer to the reality, how things really exist. So more you closer to the reality, and the lesser the emotionals, that is kind of, how's that? Less the weakening the emotions. Because so more you closer to the realities, there is no such thing or entity that exists by their own essence. So you are not giving any target for the emotional. So the emotional cannot be feed up. So you stop feeding emotions by, by mind and findings. Everything is just mental concept. There is no solidity. There's no concrete nature in any phenomena. So, and also I think we have a lot of discussion on the, either there was text, either there was also each, he touches on the, like, how the color exists, how the smell exists, how the sound exists, how the taste and the tactilities exist. So if you try to objectively identify each of the color, sound, smell, taste, and tactilities, there is no objectivities in the colors, there's no objectivity in the sound, there's no objectivity in the taste and smell. It just happen to arises from the contact, the inner element and outer element, the contact. There's a from the tongue there's the taste, from the nose there's the smell, from the eye there's the color, shape, there's ear, there's a sound. And when the sound, the sound is the, and also says when the thought, with thought you hear the sound, and the thought says sound is coming, right? The thought says sound is coming, but air consciousness, not really convinced with sound is coming. And the reality, when you analyze on the sound, there is no sound that going. Sound, the produce and cease, the vibrations in each element, different set of the elements. So one set of the elements, vibrations, and impact on other set of elements that produces the sound. So, but the thought says, yes, there is sound is coming. If sound is coming, so when I, the sound that produced by my mouth, so this your thought thinks that, oh, your sound is coming, right? For you, if you listen when a phone call to India, so India person says, oh, your sound is coming. So, yeah. So sound seems to have an ether, something that carries the sound. So when you say the ether, it means now one, sound is a one entity, single entity, and the elements different, and they're just kind of passing this, and all that is also not really true, right? So elements not really passing out the sound. Element is producing the sound. So what our thought and what the sensory experience is different. So there's a different mode of engaging an object.
Geshe-la, is there a consciousness element? I've heard that used sometimes, that consciousness is it's like a sixth element almost.
Sometimes we call it the six constituents.
Mm-hmm.
So when we count six constituents, then it says constituents of the space, constituents of the wind element, constituents of the heat element, constituent water element, and the earth element, and the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So constituents, I think in Tibetan we say come to. Why is the come? Come is the what do you call it? Is a particular of the race, like the royal family and what do you call it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lineage,
classes. Yeah,
oh, okay.
In the human race, right? So come is also one type of that. Is a constituents, means this race is particularly and have common activities, right? So like democratic constituents, Republican constituents.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a tendency to follow performing one particular, kind of voting, to Republican only, Democrat only. So this whole elements that is once it's contact with your mind and you're attached to your karma, so then it has common function. So that's why this element in this body is constituents, right? So they have the particular way of doing things is different from the outer element, different from your element, different from the animal elements. So the come truths. So I think, and this also talk about the impermanence, like impermanence, the continuity. Continuity is impermanent. Impermanent means continuities. Changes means continuously, continuously becoming something else. So that is impermanent. So impermanent does not mean it's the end, discontinued, becoming non-existing. Impermanent means continuously happening something else, right? And that means it's disintegrating. So everything rises, it has to disintegrate in order for, produce something else, to become something else. So that the impermanence here, like for example, previous life to this life. So the impermanence, the dissolutions of the previous life elements is to become this life, new life, a new element. And this life is disintegrate, and that's to become another life, another person with another element. So in this way, you say there's something that continues, right? So if you understand that the person and his life is a continuing, and you don't have to worry about, everything is impermanent, so I have to, for me to think that from this life to the next life, so me to think that I'm going to this life to the next life. So I don't need to hold on permanent I, because the continuous is within the impermanent. So the Atmas, the Atma who believe in the Atma they think, this is impermanent. All once they dissolve, once they disintegrate, and there is no continuum. So I cannot exist with, this impermanence, the impermanent body. I cannot exist with impermanent consciousness, impermanent feeling, impermanent discrimination awareness, impermanent mental factors, impermanent perceptions. I cannot exist with that. So I have to be independent in order for me to go to this life, to the next life. So if impermanent is continuity, it is the changing, it is the continuing, it is continuous existing, then I don't have to, to make up something like a permanent I, independent I. So so this is why I said even the non-Buddhist school, they really don't understand the meaning of impermanence. So the continuity, nothing transferring from the past to the future. No future is coming from the past, but still continue. So it's still existing continuously, right? Existing continuously means what has exist is not going to reappear, but it continues, right? So that kind of, when the seed disintegrates, seed is not going to reappear, but, within the end of the seed, there is continuity of the seed as a sprout. The sprout is continuity of the seed that is already passed, right? So when the seed is disintegrating, at the time, the sprout is coming to be existing. So the, disintegrating of the seed and the coming of the sprout, so it existing and also simultaneously, right? So the simultaneity of this seed being disintegrating and sprout being arising is, is unanalyzed perspective. It exists without analyzing, without objectively, seeking the objectivity in the actions. So sometimes we call is a mundanely exist, right? Is ordinarily it exists. Anything that mundanely, ordinarily conventionally, conceptually exists, is not existing intrinsically. So we have refuted intrinsic nature of disintegrating of the seed. We have refuted intrinsic nature of arising of the sprout. But we still accept there is a disintegrating of the seed, there is arising of the sprout. So, and how is it conventionally, mundanely it exists, right? So, why the Prasangika school keep talking about this is because the other school, the essential school of thought, they could not really think, if arising and the disintegrating are simultaneously, so which means for them, seed and sprout has to be simultaneously exist. Thus, there is nothing wrong with accepting arising per se and arising on conventional level. The contradiction only comes into play for ultimate arising or arising by virtue of intrinsic characteristics. So the problem is, problem in the intrinsic nature is not in the conventional reality. In the first case, on the conventional level, even if the process of cause and effect, ceasing and arising are simultaneous, the cause and effect themselves need not coexist in the time. In the latter case, on the ultimate level, however, if the processes are simultaneous, the cause and effect themselves must necessarily coexist in the time as well. So I think this pretty much people, I think many people think that, when you say, people want to know, people want to ask someone who has believed to be kind of, clairvoyance or some kind of, so people want to ask them, what is my next life look like? So when you think of next life is coming, it's almost same like the person who is driving to coming towards you. So which means when the person is driving on the road and coming, it's present. One is sitting here is the present, one is coming is the present. Now, next life coming is the future. It's not like person on the car and the driving, right? If the person next life is coming, is next life is like a person who's really driving the car, which means the next life is right now he is already exist. And how can that be, called the future, yet to become? So I think this is also what sometimes we say, that is destiny. Sometimes so they think everything is pre-designed, kind of exist, ready-made, like IKEA product. So just assemble, right? So it's not like that. Because the things, the uncertainty, that the nature of the conditional phenomena is uncertainty. It's always changeable, right? Because things do not exist as a fixed. So here's the point: when it comes to activities, comes to the activity of the effect arising, it is related to an agent, such as the sprout. Now the action and agents, when you consider this, and that one can say such things as this arises. So there is mutual relation of the support, agent, and supported the activity, its activities. sprout and its disintegrations, and sprout and its arising, seed and its disintegrating. Two actions. So what is the support and what is supported? The seed is the support, and disintegration of the seed is supported. Right. So so now if the two, the support and supported, were to possess ultimate existence, then it would be illogical for the two to change their nature into something else. You know, whenever there is the arising of the sprout, if you know, if this whenever there's a sprout arising of the sprout, if the sprout has to be exist at the time, then it's illogical. When the sprout is already exists, there is no arising of it. Right? One who is already came, there is no coming of activity of coming, because already came. When the sprout is already manifest, there is no arising of the sprout. So the arising of the sprout is not with sprout. Right? I think this is the, this impermanent nature is very, very, how to say, yeah, sometime in the Dharmakirti's text, Duwa Thandin Duwula, Mangya Pada Ni, Geje Pada Sichilos. Dharmakirti says, if things, the effect is, produced on and arising through, changing, changes in the cause. So how can the effect being certain? How can coming of the effect is certain when the seed is already in the processing? So there's how can sprout is certain when the seed is in the process of changing. So and then this is at the same seed in the process of changing, that also have the obstacles with obstacles. Seed is processing with obstacles. That proves the future sprout is not certain. Right? So this would mean that the activity of arising would exist at all time as the supported, with the consequences that even when the sprout and the like are in the arising phase, sprout must exist as the support for the arising of the process, since such a standpoint is vulnerable to objections, such as that cause and effect would be even in two things are once the support and supported, they need not remain so at all times. So the situations differs between these two cases. So to summarize, the act of sprout arising, so which temporarily coexists with seed. So sprout arising, which temporarily coexisting with the seed, is the process of the sprout approaching the moment of arising. Such process and the sprout are the supported and the supported and the support. Yet at the time of this process, although the sprout does not exist, its process can exist. So when the tomorrow is not, it not exists with today, but there is today, there is the coming of that tomorrow, right? So that coming of tomorrow is conceptually invited to be existing. So contradictions in maintaining this analogous to the following example. Generally speaking, if things that is in the relation does not exist, the other relator will also not exist. Furthermore, the seed is the thing that seed is the thing that in relations, while the sprout is the other relatums. Nevertheless, one can say that without contradictions that at the time of the sprout, the seed is no more, but the sprout is present. So if one understands how to posit the flawless Madhyamika standpoint on the basis of the understanding well how to refute opponent through this type of reasoning, and how our arguments do not our argument do not revert to our own side. So saying, when you refute intrinsic nature of coming of tomorrow, it's not going to revert to you saying, oh, tomorrow is already exist. Right? So essentially, because more they reject, and then the reason just shoot back to them. So Madhyamikas, in the contrast, we encounter those who utter all sort of fallacious argument when engaged in the refutations. But when these arguments are upended, right? Mm-hmm. Seek heaven in duplicities blusters. We should relate to them, as the Chandrakirti says in the clear words, I will not debate with those who blandly deny what is obvious. So, seek heaven in duplicities blusters. Mm-hmm. So we call nyendingwas. Right? Like sometimes people very confident. They very obvious he is contradicting, but he is very confident, like very out loud. So this is called seek heaven, and the duplicity is the blusters. Is phrase used in English? Or
I don't know duplicitous that well.
Seek heaven in duplicities blusters. Mm-hmm. So which means one who is, sometimes people maybe say overconfident. Mm-hmm. Right. Sometimes, the containers the bottle containers that has leak. So if you live too high, it becomes so obvious. So now from the Prasangika school point of view, the essential schools thought is like, seek heaven in duplicities blusters. Because they are also very serious about their own kind of, what they understand. This is, if the arising, if the coming of the tomorrow exists today, so if if the coming of the tomorrow exists today, which means that is the reality. If anything that is a reality, it has to exist intrinsically. It has to exist by its own essence. Now this become, mistake for the Prasangika school. For their point of view, it's not a mistake. So anything that exists, it has to exist by their own essence. If things do not exist by their own essence, and that has become non-existing, like a rabbit horn. So rabbit horn is not exist, right? Because there is no basis. So if the coming of tomorrow has a basis to be existing, and then it has to exist by their own essence. So you can say, so what is the basis for to prove coming of the tomorrow is exist today? So today is going to end. So today, if the today is going to end, is the basis for the coming of the tomorrow is exist. So, that, the arising of tomorrow is produced by today. So when the today exists, the arising of the tomorrow must be intrinsically exist. The Prasangika school says, if the coming of the tomorrow exists today, within today, which means, today is going to end, and it is also, there is the coming of tomorrow within it. If the coming of the tomorrow is existing within today, so what is the activities? The coming of tomorrow. Is the coming of tomorrow belongs to tomorrow, right? Your coming belongs to you, right? So new, like for example, a new Starbucks comings. So new Starbucks are coming of that is the Starbucks is coming. It's not because you coming, therefore you say, oh, Starbucks is coming. Can I say? Right. So the activity belong to agent is the sprout. When the sprout is non-existing, how can there be the coming of the sprout intrinsically exists by itself? If the tomorrow is not today, if tomorrow does not exist today, how can there be intrinsically the coming of the tomorrow exist today? So the Prasangika school says there is no logic, the valid reasoning to prove that the coming of the tomorrow is intrinsically existing today. But conventionally, conventionally, you can accept the coming of the tomorrow is exist. And coming of the tomorrow is existing, coexist with going or ending of today. So I think this really kind of helps you to understand the impermanent means, right? The impermanence means, is not transferring from the past to the future. Impermanent means one disintegrates, that produces another's. That disintegrates, that produces, and then all the effect that coming from is it following its own time. There's no kind of, there's no possible of, you plant the tomato and then kind of, possibility of becoming oranges from that. And sometimes, some people, I heard this is, one man, he fall from the train and he got clairvoyance because he damaged the brain. So now he can hear if the radio is, playing, in the Mexico, you can hear the radio from here. So because he just fell on the train. So I think that if this is happening, then there is things can born from others. So different cause can produce different effect. Sometimes, in the monastery we have. I think we are still not sure if he's kind of lying or he he claimed that he has realized emptiness. So he was in the Madhyamika school studying. So he realized emptiness. One day he climbed up in the tree on the top. Then he sees emptiness. So he was seriously kind of claiming that he realized from the top of the tree. So it's the logic, but there's no kind of sense at all. So there's Nyendingwas, seek heaven in duplicities, blusters. I will not debate with those who blandly deny what is obvious.
But I'm going to debate with you.
So
I'm going to debate all the time.
there is the story. One time there's two men is just arguing. One says 2 + 2 is 4. One says no, 2 + 2 is 5. And they argued for very long. And they went to the masters. So master says, who is the one who says 2 + 2 is 4? And then the other person, he got slapped. Why you argue with this person? So why you argue with the person who says 2 + 2? So the other is excused because whatever they want to say. If you know 2 + 2 is 4, why you argue with someone who is?
I'm going to go back to this thing about the guy who fell and hit his head, and he became clairvoyant. And I'm not so sure that again requires a belief in intrinsic existence created by other. Moreover, I think it's possible within the realm of continuity and causes and conditions. Because if this isn't possible, then I think we have to eliminate the Buddhist studies of astrology and divination and the Chinese kind of thing about I Ching. And even the omniscience of the Buddha, because the Buddha is presumably, this is one of the qualities of a fully enlightened being, is omniscient. So I see this possibility as existing, arising out of causes and conditions. And then, of course, we could say the Buddha is still an illusion, the divination is still illusion. I mean, after all, the Buddha said something like, I came as an, my paraphrase is all screwed up. I came to imaginary place and taught an imaginary dharma to imaginary beings. There's some kind of famous saying like that. Unfortunately, I can't quote it, but too dumb to quote it. My memory is too defective. But I don't think some kind of clairvoyance or recognition assumes intrinsic existence. That's my only point.
Any commentary on this? So can you make it shorter? Summarize your question. So I have another questions from the Julia.
Why can't things like clairvoyance simply come out of causes and conditions rather than intrinsic existence? Certain things arise and causes and conditions are fulfilled, and simply clairaudience or clairvoyance arises out of that.
Yeah. This is just kind of, So in the text, it says when we are, like when we were studying, we always think that, the noble object. So some of the noble object that obvious, you can understand. Some of the noble objects through reasoning. So those called hidden object, right? So through inferentials. From the inference, we understand something. And beyond that, there's another realities. So extreme hidden, super hidden. So those we, if you're not kind of reasonably logical, you can approve, and you cannot, directly perceive, but you cannot deny that. The things that you're not being able to understand, you cannot deny, but you just, put in consider it. Maybe there's something I can understand in the futures. So I don't know, the clear ones we usually call is the borrowed sense power. Is the borrowed sense powers. It's sense powers that you develop, while you are in concentrations. When you're in this, single pointed concentrations, that develop for a short time some sense power that they can hear something from the far, or you can see things beyond the mountain. So when this concentration is just when it reduce, or it kind of when you come out of meditations, and then it's because you're ordinary. So that's what we call it's borrowed the sense powers. So you're just newly developing or generating some quality in your sense powers. So that only remains there's when the concentration is there to support to that sense power. Otherwise, sometimes strong faith in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or the Guru, or the deity, can develop some kind of sense. And then, for a short time, you can see things. Oh, this may happen. This may happen. And right after that, your phone call, you just fight with people, and then all gone. Right. So I mentioned that in Thailand, there's one Tibetan monk who stays in the monastery temple in the forest for almost like 8 or 9 months, and he continued to do the meditations. He says, there's some kind of quality, the clairvoyance. He noticed that when he from sometimes he goes from the monastery to the in the village, there are some Tibetan, and they're playing dice, and he just he can see through this ball, all these numbers. So this remains for a while. So whenever he make a phone call to his parents, the families, and they talk about their problems, and all qualities just disappear. It takes long time to develop again. So just going is just instantly, and then it will take long time to build up. So sometimes it's happening. Yeah, these all. So Julie has the questions on the page 218, last paragraph. And I think she was talking about the analogy. This is analogy to the following examples. Commentaries state that analogy of employed thoroughly illustrate the illusion-like mutually dependent arising. Analogy to the following example, generally speaking, the relation does not exist. Relations.
Yes, Sheila, Julie said that she didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. It's not Julie, okay. So yeah, I think this is very, very critical for who try to understand what is the nirvana. So how it is possible. So what is the nirvana? How it is possible. So the possibility in nirvana, to be able to see that possibility is, you have to see, everything that appears to the mind is, fabrication, or the fabricated by your concept. So which means you are being able to penetrate all this mental fabrication of the concept, which means you are trying to go beyond the concept. So when you go beyond the concept, you try to see things, new reality that is, revealing. That opens the possibility, the nirvana. So nirvana is not nirvana is not possible when your mind is so kind of, covered, or tied up in mental pictures. So if your mind remain within this fence, when you only see in this imaginations, the mental construct, within that there is no possible of seeing the liberations. So you have to bring your mind to be able to penetrate all this mental construct. So then you see the things that conceptually considered to be existing are not real, not truly exist by their own essence. Because to see the nirvana, to see the possible nirvanas, you have to see how it is possible to weaken these emotions, right? So when you see, there is so convincing that yes, there is the way to suppress or reduce or weakening these emotions, then you can, you can see the possibility of the liberations or nirvana. So transcends suffering means transcends from the ordinary perception to the noble cause, noble wisdom. Okay. Julie says, Marion is the writing. Mary is writing for Julie. Oh. Because there's Julie and then what's that? Kunye. I think this is we have to try every day to see, right? So kind of how things exist. If we see things, if you try to see things objectively. So even in the dictionaries, the entity in the dictionary says, and identified in single unit. Who is identifying in single unit, right? Like the taste of the braids, that is a single unit. Color of the braid is a single unit. Is entity. So who is identifying that the taste of the braid is separate from the braid? Who is singling out this? The taste is separate from the braid. Color is separate from the braid. Tactility is separate from the braid. So the identifying single unit is identifier is the concept. You are, thought always engage selectively, right? So I is just directly perceiving anything that, right? It's kind of, sometimes people say raw data or something. I'm not sure the raw data is experiencing, but it's more affirmative, right? The thought is always selectively engaging. So that when the selectively engaging, you are separating each characteristic, right, from from others. So the entity is constructed. Entity is fabricated. Entities is possessed to be existing by the thought. So single unit is not by themselves. By conceptual single out each characters, then you can say this is the one entity, that is another entity. The color of the leaf is an entity. Size of the leaf is another entity. The shape of the leaf is another entity. The qualities of the leaf is another entity. And the thickness of the leaf is another entity. So these whole separations as a conceptually. So anything identifiable, anything knowable, anything conceivable is without mental projections. There is nothing to be identifiable, nothing as knowables. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Chanju simja rinpoche, ma yeba na geji, geba nyamba, meba ya, kone pebra. Tonye dawa rinpoche, ma yeba na geji, geba nyamba, meba ya, kone pebra. Pama simja tamje, dedan tenju ji, nyendra tamje tatu tonga. Chanju simba kana sushube, deda gunji, momam dumji ruji. Kare rabe gobe shinganzo, pendan dewa mabe juwe ne. Jere zingwa, tenzen jazo yi, shabe sile badu tenju ruji.
May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the precious mind realizing emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Due to all these merits, may all Father and Mother sentient beings have all happiness, and may all the lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are Bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately. In the sacred land surrounded by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness. more powerful genetic enthusiasms, remaining in this world until samsara ends.
Thank you very much. Thank you.